Good morning and shalom. As I stated yesterday, El Gibor is a phrase that is very important in Tanakh. I want to point out that other than Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6, it's a title that's never applied to a human. For example, in Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 10 and verse 21, it states that a remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob or Yaakov, likely in reference to Judah, to the mighty God. So in other words, because it's used exclusively to reference God, someone who says that it's not a divine title is being intellectually dishonest. Now, I find it funny that people these days are so worried about 6-7. Oh, it's demonic. Well, what about you failing to keep the Shabbat? You're doing it out of your flesh. Okay, 6-7, let's focus on that, but let's ignore the fact that we have to do the Sabbath day. You know, the funny part is, the Torah doesn't directly command us to attend a seventh-day assembly on the Shabbat. You can talk to a bunch of scholars about this. And if you don't believe me, maybe you can engage in a bit of havrutah, because this is where you would be meeting with another person and engaging in exegesis and fellowship, which involves building up each other. In Hosea chapter 11, verse 9, we read that Yahweh will not execute the fierceness of his anger, nor destroy Ephraim, for he is Elohim and not a man, the Holy One in the midst of them, and he will not enter the city. No, Yahweh is not physically constrained to being a man. Yahweh also doesn't waver like a man does in his opinion. He remains consistent throughout the Tanakh. He remains consistent throughout the Brit. Okay, he's going to be faithful to his covenant regardless of what Ephraim and Judah do. And that includes even when his children are doing this. In Babylonian Talmud Tractate Eruvin 21b, it says, "My son, be more careful in the observance of the words of the scribes than in the words of the Torah." Okay, so be more careful in how you observe the words of men than the words of Elohim? What? Babylonian Talmud Tractate Eruvin 21b continued, "For in the laws of the Torah there are positive and negative precepts, but as to the laws of the scribes, whoever transgresses any of the enactments of the scribes incurs the penalty of death." Okay, and Brother Judah, there's no intention of being anti-Semitic here, but it's no wonder why you put Yeshua to death. Because Yeshua ha-Notzari obeyed the Torah of Elohim as was prophesied in the scriptures, and he did not obey the words of the scribes because they don't matter. In Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, we read, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Yeshai or Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The spirit or ruach of Yahweh will rest on him, the spirit of wisdom and of understanding," right? He's called mighty counselor in Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6, so he needs wisdom, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and fear of Yahweh. And he will delight in the fear of Yahweh. It's as if he will breathe the fear of Yahweh. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. Now, that part of verse 4 where it ends with earth, period, all that has already been fulfilled. The second part of this is yet to be fulfilled. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. And he did slay the scribes and the Pharisees to some degree while he was here on earth. Of course, for a lot of people, this has to mean in the carnal, physical sense rather than in the spiritual sense. Now, from an anti-missionary perspective, Christians teach that Yeshua came to do away with Torah, and that would mean that he no longer breathes the fear of Elohim. He no longer lives in fear of Elohim or in awe of him. And that's a fair point, because once you do away with the words of Elohim, you're no longer living in his good graces. And that's the thing. Brother Judah does exactly what they accuse other people of doing. So, Yeshua ha-Notzari quotes Yeshayahu, and what would be interesting is that this passage from Isaiah is about the ultimate Jubilee, or Yobel, year, where slaves are set free, in the spiritual sense. So he says, "The spirit of Yahweh is on me," and he's in the synagogue, mind you, "because he has anointed me," right? That's what being the Mashiach means. To proclaim good news to the spiritually poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the spiritual prisoners and recovery of sight for the spiritually blind, to set the oppressed, the people who are oppressed by the scribes and the Pharisees, free. Now, this is part of the oppression. In Tractate Avodah Zarah 36a, we read that a court is unable to annul the decisions of another court unless it is superior to it in wisdom and numerical strength. Okay, so what do we mean by wisdom? Can we define our terms here? Are we talking about Torah wisdom, or are we talking about the wisdom that comes from this world? In Mishlei, or Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 10, we read, "The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the teachings of the rabbis is understanding." Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what that said. "And knowledge of the Holy One, Yahweh Elohim, is understanding." And I'm sorry, I have to go back to this, but where does Yahweh Elohim concern himself with numerical strength? Can someone remind me? Because last I checked, Elohim said, "Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd." But according to rabbinic law, we should be siding with the crowd. And what happened immediately after that? Well, the crowd thought it was right to set up a golden calf. Good luck following the crowd and determining your morality that way. And I've mentioned this before, the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim 2:4 says, "First put on the right shoe without tying the lace, then put on the left shoe and tie it, and finally tie the right one." So this is the highest book in rabbinic law. And they're telling you how to put on your shoes, even though there's nothing in Torah that tells you how to put on your shoes. Why? Because it's trivial. It doesn't matter to Elohim. We read in the Mishnah, "There are 4 days in the year that serve as the new year, each for a different purpose. On the 1st of Nisan is the new year for kings. It is from this date that the years of a king's rule, or regnal years, are counted. And the 1st of Nisan is also the new year for the order of the festivals, as it determines which is considered the first festival of the year and which is the last." Now, the rabbis would be correct in stating that the actual first month of the year is what determines the feast days. But Yahweh Elohim never says that there are 4 new years in the scriptures. Now, before I read this verse, please bear in mind that Yahweh Elohim doesn't want a neo-feudalistic society where there are a few people at the top and very many people at the bottom. The few at the top are materially rich and smart, and the people at the bottom are materially poor and left uneducated. In fact, he wants quite the opposite. In Shemot, or Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 2, we see, "Yahweh said to Moshe and Aharon in the Mitzrayim, 'This month is to be for you the first month of your year.'" He didn't say, "This is to be to you the first new year of your year, and you shall have 3 more new years after the fact." Okay, who added that in? Man. You want to rest at home for Shabbat? Rest at home. There's nothing in the Torah that says that we must congregate, with the exception of the 3 Hagim, the Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, at the very end of the year. So you have Christians who have come in with all their ecumenical councils, Council of Nicaea, whatever you want to call all those things, not authoritative from my point of view because they don't align with the scriptures, that say you must go to church on a Sunday. Mandatory, compulsory Sunday services. Otherwise, you're not of God. You don't believe in God. You don't believe in Jesus. You're a heretic. But what's crazy is we don't see anything in the scriptures that require compulsory services every single week. So Yahweh gave his Torah. He gave his instructions, or I would say Torot, right? Because this is the plural feminine version of that. But man came in, they distorted everything, they changed everything, and now look at where we're at. So here's a tractate where the rabbis say that the court can annul all different decisions except for the 18 things. And if Elijah were to come and tell them otherwise, if Yahweh Elohim sent a prophet, we don't have to listen to the prophet. This is crazy stuff.